All right, everyone, welcome back. We're diving into some pretty interesting stuff today. So, Trump, back in the White House, set for January, right? But it's not the usual inauguration buzz this time around. We're talking cabinet picks and a potential sidestepping of a pretty major step, the FBI background check.
Yeah, definitely unusual. Reports from CNN are suggesting that Trump's transition team, they might be thinking of using private firms to vet potential nominees instead of FBI. And the reasoning seems to be all about speed and getting things done quickly.
So, less law and order and more like, what, Silicon Valley shaking things up. Can they even do that? And what's the big deal with these background checks anyway?
Well, the FBI background check, it's meant to be really thorough, digging into everything, financial records, foreign connections, the whole nine yards. It's all about finding those potential conflicts of interest or even national security risks, things that might not be obvious right away.
Gotcha. So skipping it, kind of like building a house on a foundation you haven't even looked at. That's risky. But what about the argument that the FBI process takes forever? Couldn't that stall Trump's whole agenda before it even gets going?
Yeah, that's the argument from Trump's side. They're saying the traditional process can drag on for months, and that could really make it hard to get key people in their positions and start working. But on the flip side, critics are pushing back, saying you can't just sacrifice being thorough for the sake of speed. Especially for these positions, they have so much power and influence.
Makes sense. We're not just talking about some corner office with a nice view. These are the folks who are making decisions that affect all of us. And speaking of those folks, some of the names being thrown around for these positions, they're causing quite a stir, and not necessarily in a good way. Ready to dive into the short list?
Let's do it.
All right, first up, Matt Gaetz, the, well, pretty outspoken congressman from Florida, reportedly being considered for Attorney General.
Right, and that one's already raising some eyebrows. Because of that Justice Department investigation Gates was involved in, allegations of sex trafficking, you remember? Now, he wasn't charged, and he's always denied any wrongdoing. But the fact that he was even under investigation, it has some people wondering if he's really the right fit for such a high-profile position.
Yeah, definitely a bold move, to say the least. Next up, we've got Tulsi Gabbard, former congresswoman from Hawaii, as a potential director of national intelligence. Now, she's made headlines before for her, how should we put it, unique views on foreign policy.
Oh, absolutely. Gabbard's stances, particularly that meeting she had with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad back in 2017, and how she kind of downplayed his role as, an enemy of the United States, that's drawn criticism from both Democrats and Republicans. Putting her in charge of national intelligence, definitely going to spark some debate.
You think? And then there's Pete Hegseth, familiar face from Fox News, being considered for Secretary of Defense. Is this someone who's been very vocal against U.S. military intervention overseas?
Right, and with Hegseth. Some people are wondering how his views on, not getting involved in other countries' conflicts, how that might actually shape U.S. military strategy and foreign policy overall. Would he push for a more hands-off approach, potentially changing America's role on the world stage? Those are the questions swirling around his possible nomination.
So it's not just about experience. It's about how his personal beliefs could actually translate into real-world decisions. All right, buckle up for this next one. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., environmental activist and well-known vaccine skeptic, being considered for health secretary. Got to be sending shockwaves to the medical community.
Definitely. Kennedy's views on vaccines, particularly his claims about a link to autism, they've been widely debunked by scientists and medical professionals. A lot of people are worried that if he's appointed, it could really hurt public trust in vaccines and set back all the progress made in fighting preventable diseases. And that's not even touching on his other stances on healthcare, which are likely to be just as controversial.
So we've got some big personalities and even bigger controversies around these potential picks. And remember, this is all happening with this potential FBI background check bypass looming in the background. Feels like we're watching a political thriller unfold in real time.
It really does. This combination is creating a lot of uncertainty, that's for sure. Makes you wonder, how will skipping the FBI checks affect how these nominees get confirmed? Could it make it easier for people who maybe shouldn't be in these positions to slip through? Or will the Senate demand a tougher vetting process even with this change?
All right, we've got the players, we've got the controversy. But to really understand how serious this all is, we need some historical context. Is this background check bypass something totally new? Or has there been a similar power play in the past? I guess that's where we'll pick up in part 2.
If we look back at how presidents have done things, the FBI background check has been pretty standard for cabinet nominees for decades, really. It's all about making sure the people who get these powerful positions, they're worthy of that trust.
right? Like a safety net
Hmm.
to catch potential conflicts of interest, foreign influence, any skeletons in the closet, things that could be a risk to national security. But it sounds like Trump might be pulling a move from his first-term playbook. Didn't something similar happen back then?
You're probably thinking about those CNN reports. They revealed that Trump pushed for clearances for something like 25 people, whose applications were initially flagged or denied. National security concerns.
Ah, right. So this whole bypassing the FBI checks thing, it's not so out of the blue after all. Seems like there's a pattern of pushing back against how things are usually done, maybe prioritizing loyalty or shared beliefs over what the national security experts say.
And that brings up some serious questions. What if someone with hidden conflicts of interest or vulnerabilities to foreign influence gets into a powerful position? We're not just talking about hypotheticals here. These are real worries with potentially huge consequences.
Okay, let's play what if for a second. Say someone with strong financial ties to another country ends up heading a key economic position. Worst case scenario.
Well, imagine this person has to make a decision. One that could benefit either the U.S. or that other country. The pressure to put their own financial interests first over what's best for the country, it could be overwhelming, potentially leading to policies that actually weaken our economic security or even our national security as a whole.
A conflict of interest with some serious firepower. And what if someone with a history of, let's say, not so ethical behavior gets put in charge of law enforcement? Could that damage people's trust in the justice system?
Absolutely. Think about it. The person responsible for upholding the law, but they've got a track record of bending or even breaking the rules themselves. It could create a breeding ground for corruption. People lose faith in the justice system. And ultimately, it undermines the whole idea of the rule of law that our society is built on.
So it goes beyond just individual qualifications. We're talking potential damage to the entire system. And then there's the whole issue of security clearances. For people who might be susceptible to blackmail or pressure from foreign intelligence agencies, adds another layer of complexity, doesn't it?
Definitely. Imagine someone with a hidden past, things they haven't disclosed. Suddenly, they're targeted by a foreign intelligence agency. They could be manipulated into giving up sensitive information, making decisions that benefit that foreign adversary, or even sabotaging U.S. interests from within. These are the kinds of risks that thorough background checks are supposed to prevent.
So skipping those FBI checks might seem like a way to speed up the process, get things moving quickly. But it could actually be setting the stage for some major problems down the line.
Exactly. Like building a house without inspecting the foundation, might save time and money up front, but you're risking some serious problems later, maybe even a total collapse.
And in this case, we're not talking about just one house. We're talking about the entire U.S. government. That collapse could be a national security crisis, a loss of public trust, or even a threat to our democracy. Pretty high stakes.
This really highlights how important those vetting procedures are. Transparency and accountability in government. They're not just bureaucratic red tape. They're crucial safeguards for our democracy and national security.
So, is there a middle ground here? Can we balance the need for speed with the need for thoroughness? Could private firms have a role without completely replacing the FBI's expertise? Lots to think about as we head into our final part. Okay, so we've been talking about this whole background check issue, but there's this other piece of the puzzle. The whole idea of using private companies to vet cabinet nominees. Why is Trump's team even considering this? And is it really a good idea?
Well, as we've talked about, Trump's camp is all about speed, getting things done quickly. They say the FBI process is too slow, it'll hold up setting up the new administration, and that means they can't implement their agenda right away. Private companies, they often talk about being more efficient, faster turnaround times. That might be tempting in this situation.
Right, it's that classic Silicon Valley pitch. We can do it better, faster, stronger. But does that really work when we're talking about something as important as vetting cabinet members? Are there downsides to going this route?
One big worry is transparency. Private companies, they're not under the same kind of public scrutiny as government agencies. We might not even know who's doing the checks, what methods they're using, or what information they're looking at. That raises some red flags about potential conflicts of interest and whether the vetting is really thorough and unbiased.
It's like comparing a public company's financial reports that anyone can see to a private company keeping their accounting secret. And when it comes to power, that secrecy can breed distrust. But besides transparency, are there other areas where private companies might not measure up to the FBI?
Definitely. The The FBI has been vetting people for sensitive government positions for decades. They have a huge network of resources, classified databases, intelligence from all kinds of sources, private companies. Even with all their fancy technology, they might not have that same level of expertise or access to that kind of sensitive information.
So a private firm might be able to dig up some basic info, like someone's finances or work history. But they might miss those crucial red flags, the things that signal a real national security risk or a deep conflict of interest. Seems like we're back to that speed versus thoroughness dilemma.
Exactly. And when we're talking about these positions, shaping national policy, making decisions that affect national security, handling classified information, that trade-off becomes a really big gamble.
So much to unpack here. Feels like we're ending up with more questions than answers.
Yeah.
But if our listeners should take away one key thing from all this, what would it be?
I'd say this goes beyond just a political news story. It's a reminder that checks and balances, transparency, accountability in government, these aren't just abstract ideas. They're the things that protect our democracy and our national security.
And it shows how important we are as citizens. We need to stay informed, talk about these issues, and hold our elected officials accountable.
Well said. We dug deep into this controversy, but those core principles, they're timeless. A healthy democracy needs transparency, thoughtful debate, and people participating.
So keep asking those questions, keep exploring, keep the conversations going. That's what keeps our democracy strong. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.